Today, Senate Banking Chairman Chris Dodd announced that he is ending his talks with Republicans on the biggest overhaul of financial regulations since the Depression and will unveil his own plan on Monday. After ranking Republican Richard Shelby pulled out of negotiations, Dodd began talking instead with Republican Senator Bob Corker, who said it was stunning that Dodd shut down talks to move ahead with his own bill without any Republican support. In a speech today, our next guest, Senator Ted Kaufman, outlined what he thinks real reform would look like. And Senator Kaufman joins us tonight from Washington. Good evening, Senator Kaufman. Is it good news or bad news that Senator Dodd has given up negotiating with Republicans on the Banking Committee?
I'll be honest with you. I really don't know. I'm not on the banking committee, but I have great faith in Chris Dodd. He's been around for a long time. I really respect him. I think he's an excellent person to determine whether it's time to move ahead or not.
Did he find himself in that situation that Chairman Baucus did last year at the Finance Committee, where he continued to negotiate with Republicans and the Republicans kept moving the goalposts farther away, and the question was, should he bail out on these Republicans or keep going? We saw in that case Baucus keep going and try to get at least one, and he got at least one Republican on his bill. Dodd had, it seemed to me, did he have that same kind of judgment call to make? Do I keep talking to them or do I bail out and go my own way?
It sounded a lot like deja vu all over again, didn't it? Mm-hmm. I mean, it did have that feeling to it. Again, I think Chris would made the right decision and moved ahead, but it did look suspiciously like they were going to, it worked for them in terms of health care reform, in terms of slowing it down. I think most people believe if we'd had the vote on health care reform a couple months earlier, we would have been through all this and it would be passed and become law now. I think that it began to look suspiciously, and I'm not questioning the motivation of Senator Corker, who I respect, but I'm just saying it got to the point where it started to look that way. But again, I think Chris Dodd knows what he's doing. There isn't anybody more savvy about this thing, and I think that's probably what he decided. It was time to get moving.
What are you hoping to see in the Dodd bill that will be released on Monday?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to wait and see. What I tried to do, Lawrence, today is what I've done before I did on Afghanistan, and that is kind of, which I found helpful in dealing with legislation when I was on staff, and I know when you were on staff, and at some point you kind of sit down and say, okay, let's get away from the politics and the process, especially when you're not on the relevant committee. Do you know what I mean? And you say, what do I really think should be in this bill? And that's really what I did today. I laid out, I spent a lot of time working on this and thinking about it, and I kind of laid out what I thought should be in the bill, and really more importantly, why I thought it should be in the bill. Now we're going to get the bill, and now we're going to get into the process, and now we're going to have to start negotiating and figure out where we're going. But I wanted for at least one moment for my constituents to lay out for them kind of what I was looking for in the bill.
What would be those top three things, Senator, in that bill?
Well, I think first thing, we've got to deal with too big to fail. I mean, we just absolutely have to deal with too big to fail. We also should be dealing with the regulations, making the laws and not leaving to the regulators. When this happened in 1929, we went and we passed a whole series of legislation, the Glass-Steagall Act, margin requirements. We set up the SEC. We set up the FDIC. That was by law. We did that, and it worked for pretty well for about 50 years. Then we started chipping away and it kind of really got rolling in 1999 when we did away with Glass-Steagall. Didn't do the things we could have done in regulating derivatives. Those are the kind of things that happen. So what we have to do first is make sure we don't have anything that is too big to fail. And right now, Professor Simon from MIT pointed out that right now, the top 6 banks, their assets are 67% of the gross domestic product, where just 15 years ago they were 17%. We have 2 banks, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, which have never been in the banking business before, and we set it up, and we did the right thing. They were going to go bankrupt, so they were going to have problems with them, so we allowed them to be bank holding companies. But right now, they should not be bank holding companies. So we have to deal with Citigroup, has, I think, $2 trillion worth of assets. We have to do something in order to break them apart. That's why I co-sponsored with Senator Cantwell and Senator McCain a bill to bring back the Glass-Steagall regulations.
Senator, in the wake of, and now that we're still in, the economic recession that crashed onto us, the public is now at 82% in favor of stronger regulations for Wall Street. That's the kind of numbers where in the Senate you think, well, nothing can stop it. But something has stopped it. Something has slowed it down. Are you finding your voice on this because you are not running for re-election, because you are not looking for any contributions from any banking interests, as many other senators and congressmen are, and you're not looking for contributions from any corporate interests or anyone? Does that give you the freedom to stand up and say, this is the way it should be?
Yeah, I don't think so. You can't ever tell, because, you know, you're not, until you're sitting in a perfect position, you don't know where you are. And that's not really kind of where I'm coming from. I'm really trying to reflect what I think the vast Americans, starting with where the vast Americans are, number one. Number two, how devastating this was. And all I've tried to do is try to say, okay, I know 14 months is an eternity in Washington because I've been here, but let's go back to 14 months ago and let's see where we were, and let's see how we got there, and let's see how we got over the last 2 years, and just sit down and say, look, this is what we should do. Lawrence, the way I feel about this thing is they keep saying, why can't we, why should we be doing these things? I say the burden of proof are those who want to change, who do not want to go back to the things that worked in the past, such as Glass-Steagall, such as the uptick rule, such as these things that worked for regulation by the SEC. I think those are the things that we have to look for. And consumer product safety.
Senator Kaufman, Democrat of Delaware, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
And Senator, I just have to add, you are living the dream of every Senate staffer to get promoted into one of the big chairs and have a vote there. And all of us former Senate staffers who are watching you do it are very proud of how this has turned out.
Oh, I want to thank you very much. And that's the only pressure on me. I've got all those wonderful staff people that I got to live up to. So it keeps me going, Lawrence.
That's right. Thanks, Senator.
Sure.
Coming up, were government regulators asleep at the wheel in protecting drivers from the acceleration process?